guys, it's Benjamin and welcome to another lesson here at The Guide Plus. And this lesson is about player lock, which is a very advanced attacking technique. It's not new, it's in the game for a couple of years. And I also think we always had a lesson in the last few years about this technique, but I also think it makes sense to do a refresh on it so you see how I use it in the current game, in what kind of situations I use it, and also for the new subscribers, for the new viewers here at The Guide Plus. We are going to cover the basics, so how to do it, but then also the different situations or use cases for the player lock, and then also a very advanced application of the player lock. It's the player lock fake, and this is what we will talk about at the end. So let's start with the player lock basics. So for the player lock, there is a certain combination that you have to do. So here I'm on the wing, and at some point I hope I hit the timing right. I think it's going to be now, because now you see that my sticks are in the neutral position. You press in both sticks, and in this moment you see that the player lock gets activated. The triangle changes to a diamond, and this means player lock is activated. And what you can also see, and I will go back a little bit, and I hope I hit the timing right here. So now I have the exact frame when I activate the player lock. I only press in both sticks, but right after, when the player lock gets activated, I flick the right stick to switch to a player, because this is what you can do as soon as you have the player lock activated. When you use the right stick, you switch to another player and you can take control over this player, but not the player on the ball anymore. He will just dribble with the ball. You can't control him directly. You can only request passes and crosses and stuff like this. So now I switch to this player and I control this player and I control his positioning. And as I said, also when I do the input for a pass, I request a pass to this player. This is the only control that I have. You can switch back to him, but we'll talk about this later on in this lesson. But this is the basic application. You have someone, you dribble with the ball, you activate player lock, you switch away, you position this player that you switched away so that you can receive a pass, and then in that case, I'm inside the box and I have a good finishing position. This is the basic application of the player lock. And there are two upsides of it, that first of all you control the positioning, but also you make sure that the ball gets to the player that you want to. Because here in this situation, I didn't do the player lock. I was running towards the goalkeeper, unsure how I want to finish this situation here. And in the last moment, I decided to play a pass. I do the input with a pass without the player lock. I powered up a little bit, aim in this direction, and I wanted to play to Benzema, which is closer. But the game, instead, as you will see, decided to not play to this player, but instead to this player. But this pass didn't get to my player, and I missed a clear-cut chance. And this is one of the upsides of the player lock, because you make sure that you get the ball to the player that you want to intend to play to. So one of the upsides, I would say, of player lock is to make sure that it gets to the best player, or the player that you want to. So the first use case that I want to show to you is something that we have already seen when we are on the wing. Like, this is a typical situation. You're on the wing, you have some space, and now you have a player in the center. Most of your opponents will be aware of this potential threat, and as you will see, you have some players who are going to cover both of your avenues quite well. Like you running down the wing, maybe potentially going to cut inside to be a threat on goal, but also covering this player off. So here, controlling the player in the center, I activate player lock, I switch to him. So now I have this player. You can position him in a way that he is not marked anymore, or there is an open passing lane, because when you go back a little bit and look at this situation, this player is just running forward, and there's not really a passing option until this player stops, because otherwise he will always be marked from this center back. But switching to this player and then stopping, now all of a sudden the defender is just still keep running in that direction. I move a little bit in this direction, and all of a sudden we can play a pass like this, which was not possible before I switched to this player. So this is a typical situation for the player lock. As you can see, now I'm open situation, and I can also set up a good finish and score the goal. But if you go back here, what is important, and I think this is the most easiest situation to start using the player lock, you don't face immediate pressure. So for example, if the opponent's player would be positioned here and he would be able to challenge us right in the moment. For example, if we keep running like this, then it would not be a good situation for the player lock. But since the opponent is not in this position, but he is here in the center and just running like this, we don't have the threat like that in 1 second he can challenge for the ball and win the ball. So now we have time. We need a little bit of time to activate the player lock, but if we have this time, this is a really good tool in those wing situations to make sure that we position the player in the center that we want to play a pass to in the best possible position. So here, really good and typical, like I would say the first instance how you want to use the player lock is in such wing play situations. The next one, and this is something which I feel like is not as beneficial, but I also want to showcase it to you, is in the build-up. And this is what you will see from a lot of pro players. They also like to do it. I think they just use it to get a little bit warmed up in terms of the player lock technique, because it's a very it's a technique which is quite demanding and challenging in terms of the mechanics. So here I play the ball forward, and now I activate the player lock to switch to my striker, because you can see here on the radar he's tightly marked. And now one benefit is of activating the player lock, I can control this player, and instead of that he's just staying there or that he's running forward, now I have control over this player and I can move a little bit closer. So I make sure that there is a reduced chance of this pass getting intercepted. But once again, like this pass that I mean, once again, what is important, and this is always the case when we talk about player lock, we are not in a position to face immediate pressure. Here, the opponent, if we go back in the moment when I activate the player lock, because this is crucial here in this moment, I have a lot of space in front of me. That's why I can use the player lock. If there would be an opponent, sorry if I repeat this too often, but if there would be an opponent in front of us, and once again, in a position to just move out like this, and we're moving like this, there's no chance that this player lock would work. You have to make sure that you have space in front of you in the direction that your player is moving, because otherwise you would lose the ball. But here you can see I move closer, I can receive the ball, and that's also a way in build-up how you can use the player lock. Here in this situation, it didn't really work out, but just wanted to showcase it as well. And here we have a similar situation in the center. Here, now we have some space, but it's much more complicated, and this is also more advanced to make the player lock use case here, because it's a little bit of more of tight space. But here in a central position, we can here activate the player lock to take control of one of the strikers. Because obviously, if we can control this player and his positioning, this can be super hard to defend for the opponent, because he either has to, he has to follow us, he has to see what we are doing, because we can use this player to move like this, or like this, maybe like this, or maybe just like this. So like a lot of options, and taking control over this player gives us completely new options in a way how we can position our striker, which is not possible in another way. Directed runs would be something, but it's not as precise, and you cannot change it in just a few seconds as easily with directed runs. So, but on the other side, since we are really close to opponents, so for example this opponent or also this opponent, we are in a threat to facing immediate pressure. So this is definitely more advanced application of the player lock in terms, or like in contrast to the first situations that I've shown you on the wing. So here I activate the player lock, I switch to my striker in front of me, always with the right stick. So here, like bang, switching forward, switch to this player, and now I move a little bit away from the opponent, and then I do the passing input, just a ground pass here with the X or A button, and then I receive the ball and can score a goal. But also, it's, as I said, like just a more advanced application of the player lock. Here we have a similar use case to the one that I described at the beginning. We are on the wing, and once again, we are quite open. We have a lot of space. It's not as hard to get in positions like this, right? Like here in that case, from a throw-in, we play the ball to Rodrigo, receive the ball, we have the run of Bashar, we play the ball, and all of a sudden we have some space. So now this is, I think you should recognize this kind of pattern. We have space on the wing. Now this is a good situation to use the player lock, but in this case, we are not using the player lock that we play a ground pass. So what we do, we activate the player lock, we switch to this player, and by the way, you can also switch several times. So here I did one player switch to my one striker, and now I'm going to use the right stick again to switch another time. And here I don't want to play a normal ground pass with the X or A button, but I want to use a cross. So what you can also do is you use it with different passing techniques. So here I press the square or X button for a cross. So it works in a similar fashion. Now you still can control, and this was the benefit here, because if we go back a little bit in this situation here, it would be a little bit more challenging to make sure that the cross is not going to Benzema, or if you power up too much to Neymar, for example, my winger here. So by using player lock, I make sure that I get the cross to Cantona, and this is where the opening is. This is where my most threatening attacker is in terms of aerial presence. So that way we make sure to move into this open space. We have this crossing situation like this. So this would be perfect. And this is also how it plays out. I play the cross, my striker moves into the cross, and it works out perfectly. So these are the use cases. Now I want to talk about the intricacies about player lock, because there are some weird stuff sometimes happening when it comes to player lock, and something which I feel like is not as intuitive, because here you can see me, I activated the player lock before my player receives the ball. And another use case of the player lock could be that I switch to my winger here to take control over him to make sure that he can receive a pass. This is also another use case which I like to do when it comes to player lock. But the problem is, if this player hasn't received the ball yet, not controlled the ball yet, you cannot switch away, which is super weird. So here, here I make it the right way. I play to my winger, like to my fullback, I activate the player lock, and as soon as I control the ball, you can switch away and you take control over the winger and you get close, so you receive the ball. Nice. This is how it should work, and how you can also make use of the player lock in such situations. Here, similar situation, we play the switch of sides, we activate the player lock, but now, and this is what I wanted to explain earlier, when you now switch with the right stick, nothing happens. And this is super weird, and I just want to make you aware of it. If you because in those situations it would be quite easy to use the time that we have here when the ball is approaching us. Now it would be great to say, all right, let's use this 1 or 2 seconds that we have while the ball is traveling to us to activate the player lock, switch already to the winger, get him in the proper position. But this doesn't work, and this is what I wanted to explain to you, because here, if you switch while you already have the player lock activated, you don't get the winger, which is not cool. I'm going to have to point that out to the developers, because I feel like this is more of a bug than a feature. And this is super irritating. Here you see it again. I try it again, but you just stick with this player. And therefore, now this is going to really make you a little bit confused, because you think you would already have this player selected, but you don't. You're stuck with the player lock. And this is also, by the way, how you can use the player lock. If you don't switch away, you stick to this player. So if you have player lock activated, you play a pass, now you still keep controlling this player, which is also something I think somehow how player lock was intended to be used or designed to be used, but no one is actually using it that way. So now you still control this player, and if you play a pass, then you get the ball back to this player. And I just wanted to illustrate that. And at last, not at last, but also something that I want to point out is player lock is an extreme confidence mechanic, at least for me. There are games and situations where I don't feel confident in my abilities to pull off the player lock. And this is something that I just want to point out that you have to get beyond. You have to start using it and be confident, because in this situation here, and there's a moment of hesitation where this would be a good situation to use a player lock, right? Because I don't face immediate pressure, but I wasn't sure if it's actually going to work, because the opponent is also marking that player a little bit. I think one way would be to just move towards the goal and score directly, but I also was not sure if this is going to work. And then there's a moment of hesitation, and this is just something that I want to point out. player lock, at least for me, is a lot about confidence. Confidence that I know that I'm able to pull it off from the mechanic aspect. And as soon as you start hesitating, this could be the timing which was required to make use of it. So in this situation here, you can see I don't use it. And then at the end, I missed the chance, which I feel like I would have been able to convert if I have used the player lock. And I just wanted to showcase that as well, because for me, player lock is a lot about confidence in my ability to pull it off. And therefore, this is one of the mechanics which I feel like you benefit quite a lot if you warm it up. So for example, you have like 1 or 2 warm-up games where you also use this mechanic, so you know that that you're able to do it, and that you also have this motor skills in place to pull it off, because as I said, it's a very complicated mechanic. And now at the end, we want to talk about the most complicated applications of the player lock fake. And this is really advanced stuff. This is Elite Division, Division 1, maybe perhaps Division 2, but I feel like in Division 2, it's actually not really necessary and won't work as good. But Elite Division, Division 1, I would say, is the area where you can actually use the player lock fake. So this is the best example I have ever done with the player lock fake. It worked the best way. So here we have the typical situation, like it's a very tight space, and the more confident you are in your capabilities, the better, like in the more tighter space you will be able to use the player lock. So here it's already on the edge, because the opponent, if he would move out quite drastically, and if we just activate player lock and if he just moves out, we lost the ball. But I was sure that the opponent is paying attention to the cutback all the time, and I wanted to fake him. So what I do is I activate the player lock, I switch to this player, and now we need a very observant player, like an observant opponent, who pays attention to this, because he will see that I activate the player lock. So what he will do is he will start marking this player, because he wants to prevent this pass from happening. But this was all a fake. We activated the player lock, we switched to this player and deactivated right after. So now we have control over this player once again. And now look at this reaction from Blanc, from the opponent. Like this is the best illustration and application of the player lock fake I have ever done. Like I totally faked out this center back, the opponent. He moved out of position right in front of me, to now me being in a position to easily finish. And I'm just going to show it one more time to you in slow motion, because I think this is the best application of the player lock fake I've ever seen. Here we are inside the box, we activate the player lock, fake out the opponent, he moves out of the way, and we can finish this beautiful attack. And this obviously only works against opponents who also see that we use player lock to then be able to fake it. And now we have another situation here, how I make use of it, also very, very challenging. I was in the player lock fake mood. Very tight game, as you can see, but I was feeling really confident now in this phase about my player locks. I activate the player lock. I switch to this player. I immediately go back to him. So I already see this kind of hesitation from the opponent, right? Like he is all over the place. He sees the player lock, then he sees it deactivated. And then right after, I do it one more time. Now I play the ball and I play another pass and I score the goal. So like this is the most challenging way how you can make use of the player lock. You fake it, you then do it one more time. Like there's so much stuff that you can do, and the best players in the world use this mechanic to really be unpredictable in a lot of different situations, and they pull off stuff which you cannot really imagine what is possible. So this is what I wanted to explain about the player lock. I think we covered all the different aspects of it. As I said, very advanced mechanic. I think the basic application is something that you can start doing, especially on those wing situations. But when it comes to the player lock fake, only really advanced opponents as well. Like it won't work as good if I don't have an observant opponent who notice that I do a player lock fake. So this is it from my side. I hope this was educational, even though we already covered this kind of mechanic several years already in several lessons. But I still think it always makes sense to refresh it a little bit and to see how I use it right now. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments or also on the Discord server. This is it from my side. Keep a clean sheet. I'm out.